Hello! So it's time to do the wrap up for September. In my TBR video, I said this is coming out on Thursday. Apparently I'm impatient, and here it is today. These are all the books that I read in the, I said September. We're already doing great. And these are all the books that I read in the month of August. But before we get into the books, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Wraithmarked, which is doing another special edition for the Sword of Kaigen, this time at a more affordable price. Wraithmarked wanted to give readers an opportunity to snag a beautiful special edition of this amazing fantasy story in case you missed the last Kickstarter or that special edition was just a little bit out of your budget. This one is going to be around $50 for the book with this gorgeous artwork by Tom Yielson and designed by Sean T. King. Under the dust jacket is a beautifully illustrated wraparound cover. So if you prefer reading without the dust jacket, it's still such a gorgeous book in hand. And this campaign is working alongside the campaign for Where Loyalties Lie by Rob J. Hayes. Also comes with its own deluxe bookmark. Also looks so beautiful. So whether you're looking for a family saga following a mother, son, and father trying to defend their empire, or a story set at sea where Captain Drake is trying to unite other pirate captains under his flag and claim the crown for himself, you're going to get a beautiful, high-quality edition, amazing bookmarks, and gorgeous artwork. And Wraithmarked produces beautiful editions of their books. Their artwork is always such a standout. They always have such incredible extra art and designs on the inside, sprayed edges. They really go the extra mile. This is their last special edition that they did. I don't have a copy of this special edition yet, but I will. But every single book that I've gotten by them, I've been so impressed with the quality. So if you missed out on this Kickstarter, or if you need something that's a little bit more budget friendly, but you still want to get something that's really special for this incredible standout story, or you happen to be a collector of these special editions, the link to the Wraithmarked Kickstarter will be linked in the description of this video. Highly recommend you check it out. On to the books that I read this month. I'm going to talk about them in the order that I read them, starting with Victory of Eagles, book 5 in the Temeraire series. It was never too late to learn something. The past is unalterable in any event. The future is the only thing we can change. Learning the lessons of the past is the only way to shape the present and the future. Okay, some things that I loved about the Victory of Eagles is this book starts at a couple months after the end of the last book, which when I finished the last book, because it ended on such a cliffhanger, and I was like, how are we gonna get out of this? What are we going to do from here? And I expected it to pick up directly on the heels, but this actually worked out great because we got a closer look into dragon culture and how they're functioning now in this new situations where dragons have to function with dragons. We're really getting a lot of interaction and dialogue between dragons in their own setting where they're organizing themselves. We also got to see a lot of Temeraire negotiating with other dragons, negotiating with other humans as he continues to fight for dragon rights. We did get Temeraire POVs in this book, which was a delight. It is also kind of my big qualm with this book, or rather big letdown about this particular book, and that's that the Temeraire POVs are not very distinct from there's not a distinct difference from the Lawrence POVs, which is Lawrence is the dragon rider. I waited so long for a Temeraire POV, and the fact that I don't really feel like their voices are that significantly different when Temeraire is a completely different creature. And while we got things like he can smell with his tongue, which is interesting, it seems like his entire worldview, his perspective, the way he sees things, like the way he filters the world, I think that there was an opportunity missed to be able to be in Temeraire's head and see the world completely differently. Novik's prose and her narrative voice didn't shift very much when we were in that mind of a creature that is completely foreign to any other mind that we've experienced up to this point. And I thought I felt that was a missed opportunity. I was really hoping for a much more distinct voice for Temeraire. This was also a book where we saw Lawrence in a pretty low place after the events of the last book. He is dealing with a lot of processing. He has to do a lot of processing, and this isn't his best self that we see in this book, but I was very sympathetic of his position and with the struggle, and the fact that he was still, even though he was dealing with a lot of what changed for him and his position in the world and in the Navy, he still was attempting to be there for Temeraire, which I appreciated. And naturally, all these books are war books. They take place during wartime, so we get to see a lot of war tactics. And in this book in particular, I think that there was a good amount of progress in how the humans are working with the dragons and taking their input on how tactically the dragons know how they can fight other dragons, and really actually working with them and learning. And we saw some progress in their tactical side of things. Overall, I think that this was a great book. It had a very good rating for me, even though I had like the one qualm, that one hang up, but I'm finding myself losing motivation to continue on with the story. I feel like the story has kind of, I've gotten everything out of it that I'm looking to get out of it, and I don't think that, I don't feel like there's nothing left to say, naturally, but I have lost steam in my desire to continue on with the books in such a quick succession that I've been doing, which has been about one every other month. So fans of this series, can you tell me, do I continue on? Am I gonna love how the series concludes, or am I good? Next up is Clara and the Sun. This was in a dedicated reading vlog where I talked about it at length. I loved this book. Sometimes, she said, at special moments like that, people feel a pain alongside their happiness. I'm glad you watch everything so carefully, Clara. So this is my first Ishiguro book, and it has convinced me that I need to read a lot more of his books. So this follows Clara, who is an AF, an artificial friend. She is a robot who is sold in a store. She waits in her storefront waiting to be selected by someone, and she develops a bond with a young girl named Josie and is waiting for her to be the one to buy her, to purchase her and bring her home. And the purpose of the AFs is to help people with loneliness to not be lonely. So one of Clara's special traits is that she is an extraordinarily observant AF. She has such a curiosity for the world, but she also is a foreigner in the land of humans. This is not her natural place, though she does seem to experience emotions. She experiences discomfort and interest and a desire to help, as well as love. She wants so badly to help Josie as well as the other people in her life that she's really willing to sacrifice anything. She's willing to go to some great lengths in order to plead for the help of Josie, who is dealing with a sickness, an ongoing sickness, as well as even give of her very self for Josie. And we experience the world from Clara's lens, where she has this innate curiosity and this desire to analyze what's going on around her and to process it, and we process it with her. It has an almost childlike lens where the prose is very easy to read and you get through it very quickly, though I felt the desire to get through it very slowly and take in every detail, because the world as well has grown a lot. And it doesn't look like our world. It looks like a world that has changed, but also is in great despair, at least the part of the world that we're seeing. A lot of things, it's drawn for us in a way full of hints, like that people don't meet at restaurants anymore, movie theaters aren't open anymore. It seems very vacant in the place where Josie is living, though there are cities as well. There's this concept of the lifted and the unlifted, and we don't get to know what that means for a very long time in the book. But there's a sense from the very beginning that the world has changed greatly over time, and the people that we're experiencing seem to be those that have been left behind, and they don't necessarily want to talk about why, which means that we figure it out very slowly alongside Clara. So the world building is fascinating. It's very vague, intentionally, so like it makes sense for us not to know, because we're paired with Clara, the AF, who is very much a foreigner in the culture and the ways of humans, and we're peeling back the layers of how we got here and what this world really means, and how different people play different roles in it. Like Josie's father is playing a very different role than her mother is. And we slowly peel back those layers, but we also slowly peel back how people are surviving and processing this world, and in some ways deeply, deeply unsettling. Certain things, certain ways that characters are responding to their difficult state is very upsetting. Like, it's very shocking. And we watch Clara realize what's happening and respond to it, while we too are reeling and processing the decisions being made. It's a very closely told story. I wouldn't say that there's a ton going on, though there's a ton to process. So if you like a fast-paced plot, this won't be the one, but if you like a very introspective story that has a bittersweet tone to the very end that really begs to be discussed, highly recommend. I read this with Joanna and Jimmy, and we had so much to talk about on every page, and we are going to continue to read more Ishiguro. We're going to do Never Let You Go next, which apparently this was a response, or it's made in conversation with Never Let You Go. So we're going to read these two books very closely together, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say. But I love this. This was an amazing introduction to his works. Next is another book that I read in the very same reading vlog, and that's The Dead Cattail Assassins. People deal with memories of trauma in odd ways. This is a book following Evine, who is an assassin. She is not a cat. She does not have a tail, but she is most assuredly dead. She does not remember anything about her life, though, before she accepted this contract to work for the Goddess of Knives. But she is bound to her for 100 years in this servitude, and she has rules that she absolutely has to follow. First, the contract must be just. Second, even the most powerful assassin may only kill the contracted. And third, once you accept a job, you must carry it out. So naturally, this story begins when she fails. So Evine doesn't remember anything about her life. When she accepted this contract, her memories were taken from her. She doesn't know how she died. She doesn't know what life she lived before this. She has no memories other than the life that she's currently living as an assassin. She is dead, but if she breaks the contract, the consequences of her breaking the contract are death. Would be another death would be a light sentence. They are able to cause immeasurable pain in torturing you again and again and again because they can't kill you. And they come up with very creative ways to convince us that the penalty is going to be terrible for her. But Evine accepts this contract and again has no memories of her life. She only knows what her life is, or what her situation is now as this reanimated undead killer. So she accepts this contract and she goes to fulfill it, but she recognizes the person. She recognizes the child that she was sent to kill. And it's herself as a child. How she remembers herself, how she knows, how she has these memories, she doesn't know because she shouldn't, but she knows that that's her and she can't complete the job. And so that's all I'll say because it is very, very short, but we do have to deal with the fallout of her failing to complete the job, as well as the mystery of who would send her to kill her younger self and why would they do it. And I thought that it was such a fun story, especially reading on the heels of Clara and the Sun, which was a very close, personal, emotional story. And I really just felt like it was really difficult when I finished the book to write up a review because I felt so emotionally attached to it that I couldn't get it all out. And so to have a very fun, very fast-paced story that all took place in a day, that constantly had things being thrown at Evine and the other characters that she was with, the world felt like there was a lot going on that we didn't even really touch on, like as if we could definitely come back to this world and explore it a lot more. and it was the perfect reprieve from Clara and the Sun. I read them in the exact right order. I think for what the story is, if it were any longer, I would probably rate it lower, but it knew exactly how long it needed to be such a fun story that didn't drag on and that accomplished what it wanted to accomplish. Okay, next is The Husband. So this is a story that my friend Lynn, who keeps my spreadsheet of books, keeps track of my life, honestly, she read it. It's under literary fiction. It's kind of a domestic thriller. And she read it and she said, this had me screaming. So your turn. So this is another short one. And it follows a woman who is obsessed with her husband. So obsessed. Wait, let me find a quote for you. Shucks, I don't think I actually wrote a quote down for this book, which is a shame because it's a very quotable book. Anyway, so the protagonist, she has this fixation on her husband. Everything that he says or does, she keeps track of. She keeps a pattern. Each day has its own significance to her. It has its own colors and emotions attached to it. And she responds throughout the week according to these patterns that she's worked through. She knows if he plays a certain type of music, what kind of mood he's going to be in. If he responds a certain kind of way, it kind of drives her crazy because she needs to understand it. One particular instance was when I can't remember who initiated the conversation, but he described her, he was meant to describe her according to what type of fruit she is, and he described her friend as a pineapple, and he described her as a clementine. Neither of these things hold any sort of meaning, right? Well, they sure do for her, because a pineapple is tropical and exotic and interesting, and a clementine is a grocery store fruit. How could he? How could he embarrass her like this? How in the world is she supposed to survive in a situation like this one? So the way she responds to everything in this sort of like fixating, over-analyzing, obsessive manner is chaotic, to say the least, to read. But also, she doesn't seem to perceive the world in a way that most people would perceive the world. So she also is describing him, and he seems terrible, even though she's obsessed with him and in love with him and in love with the idea of love, and you know, he is her entire world. She also describes him and the way he treats her and the way he responds to her and the way he dismisses her, and it makes him sound terrible. But also, I don't really trust her as a narrator, so I'm not sure if he is terrible or not. Anyway, this was a book that overstayed its welcome in the sense that I was so tired of being in her mind by the end, but the epilogue was so fun. Like, I enjoyed it so much. The way everything landed was so pleasing that I ended up leaving very happy with the book. It's not one that I really recommend unless you're into a domestic thriller type of story, which I'm typically not, but I had a ton of fun reading it because it was so short. I read it all in a day. It was so short, it was so chaotic, and it was so fun to discuss with my friends. Then we have Ghost Story, which is book 13 in the Dresden Files. I'm not going to go into this one because I think just to give you a basic description of it would be a spoiler in and of itself. If you've read the series, you understand why I feel that way. But I did a spoiler-filled review for it, so I will direct you to that if you happen to have read Dresden, and if you haven't, I will say this was a much slower and more introspective story. This was one that, on the heels of Changes, which was the most wild time, the craziest of them all, this was a much needed slow down reflection and dealing with the consequences of everything that transpired in the last book. So I very much enjoyed it. It wasn't one of my top Dresden books, but I think that it was, while maybe being too long for what it was, like maybe it could have been trimmed down, I still think it was a very, very good addition to the series and exactly what needed to come on the heels of Changes. Okay, then we have The Mercy of Gods. So this is one that I have such strong positive feelings for one element and then very meh feelings for another element. So The Mercy of Gods is and it's an alien story. So this takes place on a distant planet, not on Earth, where humanity has been living for about 3,000 years. Their civilization has completely forgotten its origins and started brand new. And then they're introduced to aliens. The Carricks, which are the aliens, arrive and they take away certain humans, the brightest, the smartest humans, and force them into this game that is some kind of horror. Oh, I forgot my quote. Hang on. "You're joking." "Of course I am," Campar said. "It's how I keep from spending all day screaming. What do you do?" Easily the best part of this book is the aliens, the Carricks. They remind me of the aliens from the Remnants of Earth's Past series, specifically the Dark Forest, because they remind me of them in the sense that they are so overwhelming. In the sense that the humans at first think, okay, we'll play along, we'll do this thing, we can make it through this, but very quickly realize, oh no, they're so unknowable, they're so big, they're so vast, they're so powerful. We don't have a hope. However, in this series, the aliens are upfront, on page, interacting with the humans in very close and personal and involved ways. I won't say much about the game. All I'll say is that the humans don't know the conditions of the game, but there are high consequences in it, which makes the whole story, when the aliens are on page, when we're in that part of the story, makes it feel very claustrophobic and very like sci-fi horror-esque. The aliens, like I said, are easily the best part of the story. They were fascinating and horrifying and so powerful. And then the side of the story that just totally didn't connect for me was the human side of it. There were so many characters in this book, and I really just didn't feel that most of them were very distinct from the other. There were a couple main characters that definitely did feel like they stood out more and I cared about them a little bit more, but then there's everyone else that I just didn't feel had a lot of personality or a lot of distinction or I didn't have any sort of care for them whatsoever. And I am a pretty character-focused reader a lot of times. Sometimes I can be really forgiving about being character-focused in sci-fi, and you would think that this would be the story where I would be forgiving, except that there was so much emphasis put on the humans and on their relationships with one another and how they reacted to things. And they did react individually, some of them with depression, some of them with spiraling thoughts, some with anxiety, some with just throwing themselves into romantic relationships with each other. And because I didn't care about them, I didn't care about their reactions. And I also think that there were certain relational elements, romantic relational elements that took up so much page time, and I just did not care. Maybe that's an unfair depiction. I felt like it took up much more page time than the book needed it to. Also, I think that this is probably nitpicky of me, but much like my complaint for the Temeraire book, the first book that I talked about in this video, the humans they've been living on this other planet for 3,000 years, and they've built up civilization anew, forgotten their origins, but it seems like they kind of just function as if humans from modern Earth, with a few differences. But it seemed like there was such an opportunity for the setup of the story to actually get into the heads of people who have built up a whole new perspective on the world, a whole new way of communicating and thinking, and a whole new culture. And there was so much opportunity for the humans to be very distinctly different based off of their origins, this other planet that they've lived on for thousands of years. But they were very familiar, which seemed odd for the way the book was set up. Overall, I did enjoy this book quite a bit, especially the alien elements. If the aliens were on page, I was invested. But when the aliens were off page, I really just didn't have any sort of motivation to read it. Last thing I read this month was a short story by Stefan Zweig. This is the collection of A Letter from an Unknown Woman. I bought this collection after I read A Letter from an Unknown Woman and I loved it. And I finally have read the next short story in that collection. It's called A Story Told in Twilight, and I enjoyed it so much. Which of them could it be? Kitty, whom he knows least because she's the eldest? Margot, with her abrupt manner? Or little Elizabeth? He dares not wish it to be any of them. Secretly, he wants it to be none of them, or he wants not to know, but now his desire carries him away. Okay, so in this short story, we follow a man named Bob who, or rather a young boy named Bob, who is kind of between childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, and he feels that feeling quite strongly, where, let's see, it says he's not allowed to join the gentlemen yet, or only briefly, and he feels shy in the presence of the ladies, because when he opens the door, they suddenly lower their voices, and he senses that they are discussing matters he isn't meant to hear. So he's kind of in this in-between, and as he's navigating life in this in-between, randomly, at Twilight, there is this person, this woman who, or girl, he doesn't know her age, but this woman appears and sort of just throws herself on him and aggressively kisses him, and he's swept up in this romance or this collision of sorts. And then she flees away. She has a bracelet with a coin on it that sort of is very memorable to him in their encounters, but he doesn't know who she is. He doesn't know why she's visiting him in this way, but he develops this obsession, and that's something that I've noticed about Zweig's stories, is that they are about obsession. At least the 3 short stories that I've read by him, each of which, actually I think Chess Story is closer to like 80 pages, but both A Letter from an Unknown Woman and A Story Told in Twilight are both 40 pages, thereabouts. No, I lied. A Letter from an Unknown Woman is about 60, and A Story Told at Twilight is around 40. Anyway, so it's very short, but you don't need to know any more of it than that. In the daytime, he is trying to figure out who this Twilight person is, and he's trying to follow the clues and navigate life and understand who it is that's visiting him at Twilight, and then at Twilight he has another encounter, and the obsession continues to chew away at him to the point that he becomes erratic in his behavior and in his pursuit of who he thinks is the woman visiting him at Twilight. It does get resolved. Zweig is not the author that gives perfectly satisfying conclusions, but they're always enough for me because I so connect with his writing. Of the 3 that I've read, this is probably my least favorite, not The Letter from an Unknown Woman, but A Story Told at Twilight is my least favorite of the 3, so I would say if you have heard me go on about Zweig and you're interested in starting one, I would probably start with Chess Story. I would probably go in the same order I went in. Chess Story, then A Letter from an Unknown Woman, then this one. Or you can start with A Letter from an Unknown Woman. That's probably my favorite of his, but I can also see it just not working for anyone but me. Zweig is an author that I feel... Do you ever have an author that just connects to you? The way they write is so evocative and draws you in a way that just is right for you, but you don't really know how to recommend it to people because you understand that this connection is it'll work for some and it'll not work for others, and you're not sure how to recommend it. That's how I feel about Zweig. That's how I feel about Vandermeer. That's how I feel about du Maurier. So Zweig is just an author that the way he writes, the way he structures sentences, the way he illustrates obsession and the descent into obsession is so fascinating to me, and it draws me in, even though his stories aren't happy, they're not cheerful, they're not healthy, but they depict this obsessive state in a way that fascinates me. I feel like The Husband is a story that kind of tried to be what Zweig is, and I might have enjoyed it more if I hadn't already discovered Zweig. Anyway, like I said, it's my least favorite of his that I've read so far, but it was still a fantastic read. So those are all the books and 1 short story that I read this month. I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you read any of these? Do you have any how did you find the stories? Did you like them? Did you not like them? I would love to continue to discuss them in the comments. Also, be sure to check out the Sword of Kaigen Kickstarter. If you haven't looked at that already, it is in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.